You ever have that feeling, looking at a patient's chart, that you're missing a huge piece of the puzzle? Well, today, we're going to find that missing piece. We are unlocking the human blueprint. We're going to take all of these super complex genetic concepts and boil them down into a clear, powerful framework you can actually use right at the bedside. So let's just dive in. Here's our game plan. We'll start with the basics, the language of genetics. Then, we'll get into the math of how these things are passed down. After that, we'll look at what happens when the code itself breaks. And finally, we'll wrap up with the really important stuff, the legal and ethical shield that you need to protect yourself and your patient.
All right, first things first, we have to get our terms straight. We're talking about our biological code here, but it makes a huge difference whether we're looking at a single word or the entire book.
Okay, let's break this down because it's a big deal. Genetics versus genomics. Think of genetics as a magnifying glass. You're zooming way in on a single gene, like the one that causes sickle cell disease. But genomics, that's the wide-angle lens. You're pulling back to see the whole landscape, all of the genes, and this is the key, how they're interacting with each other and the environment. That's how we get these complex conditions like type 2 diabetes. So here it is, your big NCLEX takeaway. If you see a question on an exam about genomics, the right answer has to include the environment. It's not just about the code itself. It's about that dance between our genes and the world we live in. Don't forget that. So now that we've got the language down, let's see how this stuff actually works in a family. You know, genetic diseases aren't random. Nope. They follow these really strict, predictable, mathematical rules. And if you understand the rules, you can predict risk with some pretty stunning accuracy. Think of this table as your treasure map. It shows the 4 main highways that genetic diseases use to travel through a family. We're going to really focus on the big 3 because, honestly, these are the ones you're going to see over and over in your practice. First up, autosomal dominant. Just think of this one as a loud, bossy gene. You only need one copy from one parent to get the disease, and Huntington's is the classic tragic example. It's like a genetic time bomb that goes off later in life. For a parent who has it, it's a coin flip for every single child, a 50-50 chance of passing it on. Now let's talk about autosomal recessive. This gene is quiet, it's shy. You need 2 copies, one from each parent to actually have the disease. So if both parents are what we call carriers, meaning they have one copy of the gene but no symptoms, there's that classic 25% chance with every single pregnancy that the child will get the condition. Cystic fibrosis is a perfect example of this.
And then we have this really unique situation, X-linked recessive. The broken gene is literally riding on the X chromosome. Now, since males are XY, they don't have a second X chromosome to act as a backup. It means they can't be carriers, they either have the disorder like hemophilia or they don't. It's on or off. And that last point there, that's a super important rule we're about to highlight.
Okay, NCLEX alert, big time. This is a classic trick question, so listen up. A father cannot, I repeat, cannot pass an X-linked disease to his son. Why? Well, think about it. He gives his son the Y chromosome, right? That's what makes him a son. The faulty gene is on the X, so it's a 0% chance. Now, his daughters, that's a different story. They get his faulty X, making all of them carriers. You have to lock that rule down. Okay, so we've got the rules of the road for inheritance, but what's actually causing the problem in the first place? Well, it all comes down to a typo, a little mistake in the DNA code itself, a mutation. And you have to know not all typos are created equal. A germline mutation, that's the one you inherit. It's in every single cell of your body, and yep, you can pass it on. A somatic mutation, though, is one you acquire. Think smoking causing lung cancer. It can cause disease for sure, but it is not passed on to your kids. That is a huge distinction when you're educating patients. So here are the main kinds of errors you'll see in the DNA. A silent one? No big deal. It does nothing. But a missense or a nonsense mutation, whoa, those can be absolutely catastrophic. Let's look at why. Okay, a missense mutation. It's like changing one letter in a word that completely changes the meaning of the sentence. A single DNA letter gets swapped, and that changes one tiny amino acid, which then causes the entire protein to fold up wrong. This is exactly what happens in sickle cell. That one change is what forces red blood cells into that dangerous, sticky crescent shape. A nonsense mutation is even more dramatic. It's like putting a period in the middle of a sentence. A single letter change creates a premature stop signal, so the protein-making factory just grinds to a halt. It spits out a short, chopped up, totally useless protein. And that's the problem in many cases of cystic fibrosis. So,
How do you spot this stuff at the bedside? What are you listening for? These are your big red flags. When you're taking a family history and you hear about cancer or a heart attack under the age of 50 or a sudden, unexplained death, your genetic alarm bells should be ringing off the hook. That needs a closer look, for sure.
All right, let's shift gears from the biology right to the bedside, because when you unlock someone's genetic code, that knowledge comes with some heavy ethical and legal responsibilities. These are your guardrails.
So let's think through this classic and tough ethical dilemma. Your patient's genetic test comes back positive for a fatal disease. You know their kids are at risk, but your patient looks you in the eye and says, "Don't tell them." What do you do? What is your absolute #1 priority?
And here's the answer. It is crystal clear. Your priority is the patient in front of you, period. You protect their privacy above absolutely everything else. The law, the ANA Code of Ethics, they're not ambiguous. You have no legal authority to breach confidentiality to warn family members. Your duty is to your patient's privacy. End of story.
And what about your patient's biggest fear? Discrimination. You have to be their advocate, and you do that with GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. It gives them 2 massive shields. 1, health insurances can't use genetic info to deny them coverage, and 2, employers can't use it to hire, fire, or promote them. This is huge.
Okay, deep breath. Let's put this all together. We're going to do a quick visual recap and trace the entire path from a single line of DNA code right to your actions as a nurse.
See, it all starts with that genetic blueprint, which follows those strict inheritance patterns. Then, a typo, a mutation in that code, is what actually causes the disease. Your job, in your assessment, is to spot the family history red flags that point to that mutation. And then, finally, you use your legal shield, confidentiality, and GINA to protect that patient. That's the whole journey, from code to care. You know, we've covered the science, we've covered the law, but it all comes down to this one last, really important question. Knowing a patient's genetic blueprint, that's just the beginning. That's the data. The real question is, how are you going to use this profound knowledge to provide care that isn't just precise, but is also deeply, truly compassionate? Because that is the art of nursing.